You know you're on a pretty good run when over the last 2 years you've gone 10-3, 11-3, won an ACC title, played in a New Year's Six game, had an undefeated regular season, at least against the ACC, yet it's still considered a massive disappointment by the overwhelming majority of college football fans, Tater Man included. Yes, even the Tater Man disappointed in the last couple of seasons out of Clemson. But that's what happens when you run off a string of playoff appearances and win a couple of national titles like Clemson has done over the last 7 or 8 years. Has been a little bit disappointing over the last couple of years, specifically the offensive performance. But Clemson has addressed those issues, or at least attempted to, this offseason, making a change at quarterback and offensive coordinator. In today's video, I'm going to give you a preview and a complete game-by-game prediction for the 2023 Clemson Tigers. Let's go. Yeah, good morning, and that is Uncle Lou here. Yep, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are even watchable. Some of them. And I'm doing a complete series of these videos. I've done, I think, 10 or 11 of these already, previewing teams and then giving you a game-by-game prediction for the season. You know, it's one thing to look at a team's schedule and go, they're going 10-2 or 11-1. It's another thing completely to try to predict each individual win and loss. That makes it a lot harder. But that's what we try to do here every offseason on LouTube. I hope you'll be a part of it. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the thumbs up. Let's get started. All right, shout out to my boy Tiger Paw Craven, who is a Tater Man. He is a Tater Man. Yes, believe it or not, there are some Tater Men who actually enjoy Uncle Lou. I'm a pretty nice guy. Sometimes, though. Yeah, shout out to you, Tiger Paw. He wanted to see this Clemson preview and prediction. What I do every day when I get ready to sit down and do one of these preview or prediction videos, I pull up my Patreon page, and everybody who's a member over on my Patreon page, they've left comments over the last couple of weeks about what team it is they want to see me do a prediction for. So I just pick a team off that list every single day. And today, Clemson drew the short straw, so it's time to talk about Clemson today. But Tiger Pro, I really appreciate you helping to support the channel over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. There is no way I would be able to do this channel year-round and support myself without the support I get from all of you over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. So I can't thank you enough for signing up over there. If anybody wants to check out the Patreon page, there's a link in the description of this video that'll take you there. All right, here we go. Let's talk about Clemson. I'm going to follow the same formula I've sort of done with the other teams. So let's start out by looking at some numbers heading into the season for Clemson. Then we'll look at the offense. Then we'll look at the defense. Then I'll put the schedule up on the screen, and we'll go through it game by game, and I'll give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Where do I have Clemson ranked heading into the 2023 season? I've got them ranked 14. I do 3 preseason or off-season polls or rankings, whatever you want to call them. I do one in February after signing days have finished. I do one at the end of all the spring games. That's the one where I have Clemson at 14. That's my most recent one. I then do a third and final preseason ranking around the first or second week of August, 2 or 3 weeks before the season starts. So, obviously, some potential for Clemson to move up. I've got them at 14 right now. Where does Clemson rank nationally? Now, I know no poll and no ranking matters, and, you know, including the AP and the coaches poll. Really, neither one of those polls are out yet. They don't come out till August, end of July, August. But everybody and their brother puts out a some sort of off-season poll or ranking, right? Literally everybody does it. Whether you're talking about some of the bigger, more well-known names like ESPN, Fox Sports, Sports Illustrated, whatever, all the way down to all the blogs and recruiting services. 24/7 does one, On3, Saturday Down South. Any idiot with a YouTube channel. Literally everybody does it. So I scanned about 15 or 20 of these rankings this morning when I got ready to do this video. Some of the bigger ones, some of the lesser-known ones. And most people seem to have Clemson ranked in the 8 to 13 category. Now, notably, Phil Steele, for those of you who know who that is, he's been putting out these preseason preview magazines for decades. His magazines predate the internet. They've been coming around so long. He's got Clemson at 2. That is by far the highest ranking I've seen anybody have for Clemson. It's hard to find a ranking anywhere that even has Clemson in the top 5. Phil Steele's got him at 2. I've seen some people have Clemson ranked as low as 15 or 16. Like I said, I've got them at 14. The majority of the polls you look in have them in the 8 to 13 range. So that just gives you kind of an idea of what some people are thinking about Clemson heading into the season. What about a win total for Clemson according to Vegas? I like to look at these numbers because these numbers are completely and totally unbiased These are, these numbers come from people who are willing to put money on the line, right? They bet on these things, and that's what drives these win total numbers. Yeah, Vegas or a sports book or whoever has to set an initial number, but that number moves up or down based on how people are betting. So it's a pretty accurate indication of how the public feels about a team, at least the betting public, in terms of a win total. Now, this is for a 12-game regular season, so of course this isn't considering any potential ACC championship game, bowl game, playoff, anything like that. It's just for the 12-game regular season. The Vegas win total right now for Clemson, 10 wins. So, that's a betting number. So the way that works is if you are somebody who thinks Clemson is going to win more than 10 games in the regular season, you would bet over 10. If you think they're going to win less than 10 games, go 9-3 or worse maybe, then you would bet the under 10. What about Heisman Trophy candidates? Clemson, of course, has had an amazing string of quarterbacks, well, until the ukulele, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But, even Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, obviously winning the national titles there. Kelly Bryant was, maybe not up to par. And then the DJ Ukulele. But Klubnik is the quarterback now. Ukulele has transferred. Klubnik's going to be the starter. This surprised me. Now, he did play a lot last year. He played in almost every single game in a backup role. They would send him in certain situations in a game. He started twice. So only 2 starts, the ACC championship game and then the Orange Bowl against Tennessee. Cade Klubnik is 5th in the Heisman odds right now. That surprised me a little. Not that I don't think Cade Klubnik will be or can be a good quarterback. It's just a little odd to me that he's that high considering how little experience he has. And we'll talk about some of that experience in a minute when we talk about the offense. But he's currently 5th in terms of odds when it comes to winning the Heisman for 2023. His odds are at plus 1,400. He's ahead of Drake May. Drake May is right behind him at plus 1,500. Now, we all saw what Drake May did over the course of the season last year. One thing to keep in mind about Heisman ratings, this isn't necessarily an indication of people thinking that Cade Klubnik is a better quarterback than Drake May, but that potentially Clemson is a better team than North Carolina. And I think we all understand kind of what the Heisman vote has devolved into over the last 3 or 4 decades, which is basically you have to be on a 10-plus win team to kind of have a shot to win the Heisman. Now, there have been a few exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, if you're not a top 10 team, doesn't matter how good you are, you're not getting any votes for the Heisman. I think that may have something to do with Klubnik being ranked ahead of Drake May, because I don't know of anybody right now anyway. And I'm not talking about potential. Potentially, Cade Klubnik can be a great quarterback, but based on what we've seen so far from these 2 guys in college football, I don't think there's anybody who would say that right now, today, Cade Klubnik is a better quarterback than Drake May. Now, again, by the end of the season, once we see Cade play an entire season, we may all feel differently, but that just struck me as a little strange. But Cade Klubnik, 5th best odds to win the Heisman at plus 1,400. Drake May at plus 1,500. What about winning the ACC? Now, this is something that has flipped recently in the last couple of days. Again, these are betting numbers here. So they change, based on who is betting on what. Right? Just like with the win total. The Vegas win total can go up or down based on how people are betting. The same thing with the odds to win conferences or national titles. Florida State has been the favorite to win the ACC, the betting favorite to win the ACC for the majority of the offseason. Not today. Clemson has overtaken Florida State recently within the last few days and become the betting favorite to win the ACC. Now, it's very, very close. Clemson right now is the favorite to win the ACC with odds at plus 155. FSU right behind them at plus 160. This is the closest of any 2 teams in any conference in terms of odds to win the conference championship. No other 2 teams are this close in terms of odds. So this is literally a flip of a coin right now in terms of Vegas odds to win the ACC between Clemson and Florida State, which, of course, play in the regular season. So we'll talk about that game when we put the schedule up here in a few minutes. And lastly, the national title odds. Clemson 8th. Best odds in the country to win the national title at plus 1,800. They're actually tied with FSU in odds to win the national title. So, again, this tells you how close the betting public perceives Clemson and Florida State to be. Extremely close in terms of odds to win the national title, dead even in terms of odds to win the national title. I think our ACC title, very close to win the ACC title, dead even odds to win the national title at plus 1,800. USC, slightly ahead of that at plus 1,600, Southern Cal, and Texas, slightly behind that at plus 2,200, are the teams sort of in that same category with Clemson and Florida State in terms of national title odds. All right, here we go to Clemson Tigers. Now, like I mentioned, 2 really good years the last 2 years, but unfortunately came up a little bit short of making the college football playoff, which at this point has become the goal for Clemson as a program and as far as their fan base is concerned. And honestly, it's hard to blame them. They had a really amazing run of ACC championships and made the playoffs a bunch of years in a row. And like I mentioned, winning 2 national titles in 2016 and then again in 2018. So I understand the expectations being what they are. So even though Clemson had 2 really good seasons the last 2 years, they've been viewed as a little bit of a disappointment because they came up short of making the playoffs. But they were 11-3 last year. They did miss the playoffs for the second year in a row, like I mentioned. But 12 straight 10-win seasons now for Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Just a remarkable run, especially when it's hard even to remember, really, how bad Clemson was when Dabo got there. If you're college age right now, you probably don't even remember Clemson being bad at all. But they were not just bad. They were pretty terrible for a while prior to Dabo getting there. But now Dabo has reeled off 12 straight 10-win seasons after going 11-3 last year. It didn't end the way Clemson fans wanted it to end in a few different ways. We mentioned them not making the playoffs. Clemson also lost their last regular game of the season to in-state rival South Carolina. Not only did they lose it, they lost it at home. It was a home loss for Clemson. Clemson's first home loss since 2016. Clemson had the longest home winning streak of any college football team in the country. That was snapped by South Carolina, who was red hot at the end of last year. If you remember, they beat Tennessee the week before that, South Carolina did. So while South Carolina wasn't a great team and didn't have a great season overall, they beat 2 top 10 teams in the last 2 weeks of the regular season, Tennessee and Clemson. That snapped Clemson's home game winning streak. Ended the regular season on a disappointing note. They did go out and win the ACC championship the following week. They were placed in a New Year's Six Bowl, the Orange Bowl against Tennessee, and Tennessee just absolutely destroyed them. Last year was sort of a weird year for Clemson in that they had 3 losses. None of them were ACC losses. They lost to Notre Dame in the regular season, and even though Notre Dame's kind of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of deal they've got with the ACC, those are not conference games. When Notre Dame plays an ACC team in football, it's not a conference game. So lost to Notre Dame, lost to South Carolina, lost to Tennessee. 3 losses, all occurring outside of the ACC. But they did win the ACC championship game. Came up short in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee. So what is Dabo's plan to correct whatever it is that he perceives to be wrong with Clemson? And again, you have to keep in mind, when you're talking about a team that's winning 10, 11, 12 games a year, winning conference titles, making New Year's Six Bowls, when you're talking about fixing what's wrong, you're talking about very minor changes that need to be made to a pretty good team and program, especially in Clemson's case. It's not just that Clemson has had a good team a few times here and there. Clemson has had a really good program over the better part of the last decade. I just mentioned how many 10-win seasons they have in a row. So we're talking about small changes here, tweaks really that would need to be made. What has Dabo done between last season and this season to try to take Clemson back to where they were just a few short years ago, which is making the playoffs almost every single year? Well, most notably 2 things. Gone is DJ Ukulele, and I'll be the first to admit the guy did not look good hardly ever when it came to him playing quarterback at Clemson. For whatever reason, the Clemson offense was just never really able to get going under the ukulele. Now, I've heard everything from, turns out the ukulele's not nearly as good as people thought, to, it was all the offensive coordinator's fault, to, Clemson's offensive line was bad, and they don't have the wide receivers they used to have. Heard a lot of different theories and scenarios about why it is the offense has been kind of stuck in the mud the last 2 years under ukulele, but reality is, whatever you think the reason is, something needed to change. And in Dabo's mind, that was the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. So gone is the ukulele. Cade Klubnik will be QB1 for Clemson this year. Barring injury, he'll start every single game. And Brandon Streeter's gone as offensive coordinator. A 1-year failed experiment Dabo promoted from within, of course, last offseason, promoting Brandon Streeter to offensive coordinator. It did not work. Like I said, I think there is some truth to all of that reasoning that you hear. I do think Clemson's offensive line played poorly at times. There's no question their wide receiver room as a group is not what it was 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And they had bad quarterback play. Unfortunately, when that happens, there has to be a fall guy, and for Brandon Streeter, it was him. So he's gone, and Clemson made what I think is probably the best coordinator hire of the offseason by going out and getting Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator from TCU, who led TCU to an undefeated regular season, a trip to the playoffs, a win in the playoffs. Getting humiliated in the national title game, but made the national title game at TCU with Max Duggan. He's now at Clemson. Whatever you think about Clemson last year and whatever you think about TCU last year, Garrett Riley offensively is going to have a lot more talent to work with across the board at Clemson than he did at TCU. So I think this is a big hire for Clemson. And with the quarterback swap over, I'm less convinced that this will be a home run. It's not that I don't think Cade Klubnik has a lot of talent, potential, and ability. Of course he does. He's got a ton of talent, potential, and ability. So did the ukulele, and it just didn't pan out. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't pan out for the ukulele or for Klubnik, but it does mean that it's a possibility that we have to at least consider. And if you look at Klubnik last year, and I know he didn't play a lot, he played more than most backups, though. He played in almost every game, like I mentioned. Dabo was running him into the game in the first half, even in a lot of situations, to try to get him some experience. You could tell last year that Dabo was kind of it was just a matter of when, in terms of Dabo pulling the trigger on benching ukulele and playing Klubnik. He was trying to get Klubnik up to speed as quick as he could. And then he did get the 2 starts at the end of the year, one in the ACC title game and one in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee. He went 1-1 in those games. They won the ACC title game with Klubnik. They lost the Orange Bowl to Tennessee with Klubnik. Klubnik played pretty good. He averaged 340 yards in those 2 starts. The problem for Klubnik last year was scoring and turnovers. A lot of yards, not a lot of points. They had a hard time scoring against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, and Tennessee's defense is absolutely horrendous. It's terrible. You have to remember, same South Carolina team that beat Clemson put up 62 points on Tennessee. Their defense was just absolutely horrendous. And while Clemson had no problem moving the ball, they accumulated a lot of yards. They had a really hard time converting that to points. And the other issue with Klubnik that popped up last year is interceptions. Now, you see this a lot from freshman quarterbacks, right? Freshman mistakes. Windows close a lot quicker at the college level than they do at the high school level. So you see a lot of freshman quarterbacks. Well, first of all, you don't see a lot of freshman quarterbacks play in meaningful time in meaningful games, and this is one of the reasons. Why. But Klubnik had more interceptions last year than he had touchdowns. Now, that's clearly, if you're going to pick out one thing that Klubnik has to improve on from last year to this year, it's that. You cannot turn the ball over at a greater rate than you're scoring. You just can't. I don't care how good your defense is, and in the case of Clemson, they had an amazing defense last year. We're going to talk more about their defense this year in a minute, but I don't care how good your defense is. If you keep giving the other team extra possessions, it's going to come back to bite you. So he's got to clean that up, and we'll see if he can do it. But those, of course, were the 2 biggest changes made offensively for Clemson in the offseason. New offensive coordinator Garrett Riley and new quarterback Cade Klubnik. Let's talk more about this offense. At running back, they've got Will Shipley, and to me, he's the best player on their team. At least he's the best playmaker on their team. By far, the most consistent playmaker on their team. Not sure if he's quite on the level of a Travis Etienne or Trevor Etienne. Which one? I get confused now because the other one plays for Florida State now. Is it Travis? I believe it was Travis that played for Clemson. Anyway, the guy set every single Clemson and ACC rushing record known to man. Not sure if Will Shipley's quite on that level as a pure running back, but he's an all-purpose, do-it-all player. He can return kicks. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can line up in the slot. And obviously he can run the ball as well. He's just an unbelievable player, future NFL player for sure. Averaged 124 total yards last year. That's all-purpose yards, so that's rushing, receiving, return yards, everything. Averaged over 100 yards a game, 124 yards, scored 15 rushing touchdowns. By far Clemson's best weapon. Offensive line, which I think was a weak spot for Clemson last year, gets 4 of the 5 starters back. Now, so that's a good thing and a bad thing both at the same time, right? I think it's more good than bad, though. they have the talent. For whatever reason, last year it didn't show up on the field, but they recruit well. They've got talented offensive linemen, just didn't play well last year. Well, now those offensive linemen have a whole nother year of experience, and you get 4 of those 5 starters back. Now, the one that you lose is a big loss. You lose left tackle, and you have to find a replacement there. Left tackle, the most important offensive lineman on the field for a right-handed quarterback for obvious reasons. Or maybe it's not obvious to you, I don't know, but that's your blind side when you're a right-handed quarterback. But anyway, so getting 4 of those 5 offensive linemen back, even if they don't get a whole lot better from a talent perspective from one year to the next, just playing together for an entire year, I think, and then bringing back 4 of that 5 is going to make that offensive line a little bit better than it was last year. Wide receiver, to me, another concern at Clemson. Again, if you just think in your mind back to when Clemson was sort of at its peak there in 2016 under Deshaun Watson, and then 2018 with Trevor Lawrence, and even after that, the T. Higgins, these wide receivers that they had that were just lighting defenses up. I mean, they're in the NFL now. Highlight reel catches every single day. 6'2", 6'3", 4.4 40s, could jump out of the gym, wingspans a mile long, just prototypical NFL wide receiver ones, right? They don't have that. If you're not a Clemson fan right now, just think in your head, just name a Clemson wide receiver right now. Name 2. You probably can't, and that's not an insult to anybody. I mean, I love college football. I watch a ton of college football. I do, talk college football for a living. If you just name some random team somewhere, I probably couldn't name 2 or 3 of their wide receivers either, unless they're really, really good, and that's kind of the point. So I'm not here to say that Clemson's wide receivers are terrible or that they can't have a good year in 2023. But when Clemson was at its best, yes, they had elite-level quarterback play. They also had a couple of wide receivers that any average college football fan could have named off the top of their head. And right now, they just don't have that. Now, they do get that sophomore back. Is it Antonio Williams? 604 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. Obviously, some potential there. And I do like Clemson's tight end. He didn't put up a lot of numbers last year, but I do like him. Bringing Stool, is that his name? Why he's bringing a stool, I've got no idea. But that's his name, Bringing Stool. It's got to be a Native American name or something. It's just strange, but that is his name, Bringing Stool. But he is good. I like watching him play. I think he'll have a good year. The passing of the football was Clemson's downfall last year. And again, I used the word downfall. We're talking about an 11-3 team, okay? It's the weirdest thing, and I don't know that this happens to anybody else. Maybe if I think more about it, I could come up with some more examples. When you just listen to people talk about Clemson, and this was the case last offseason too, you would think they were talking about a team that went 7-5 or 6-6 and struggled to make a bowl game. I have to keep reminding myself, and I want to remind y'all, we're talking about a team that's won 22 games in the last 2 seasons, 21 games, whatever it is, 11-3, 10-3. Where they have struggled has been the passing of the football. They were 66th in the country last year in passing offense. Again, remember back to when Clemson was at its peak. 66th in passing now. That's got to get a lot better. We're going to move right on to the defense, and this dovetails into this perfectly. As bad as Clemson was at throwing the ball offensively last year, they were equally as bad as at defending the pass. They were 76th. This might be more surprising, actually. They were 76th in the country last year in passing defense. 76th. Now, another thing you hear people say all the time when they talk about Clemson, myself included, is, yeah, well, the offense has struggled a little, but their defense has been elite. And that's true, but it's really been the front 7 of Clemson. The secondary let them down last year. I know Sam Hartman's a good quarterback, but Sam Hartman and Wake Forest threw 6 or 7 touchdown passes against this Clemson defense. That's an indictment on the secondary. That's an indictment on the pass rush. I don't care who you're playing. You give up 6 or 7 touchdowns, that's not good. And you say, well, that's just a one-game deal. That was an anomaly. Okay, well, over the course of the season, they were 76th in the country against the pass. So offensively, right, you're trying to pinpoint what area do we need to improve to get from 10 or 11 wins to 13, 14, or 15 wins? Passing offense. Defensively, it's the same thing. Passing defense has got to improve drastically. This is Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Southern Cal level bad, being ranked 76th against the pass, the Taters. Let's talk about their defense. The bad news first. They lose 4 all ACC players off of last year's defense. That's a lot for anybody to replace. The good news, 8 starters are back on that defense. 8. Unbelievable. I would have guessed that number was lower just based off the number of Clemson players it seems like I watched get drafted this past April. But they returned 8 starters off one of the best overall defenses in the country last year. Again, we know about the passing numbers. But overall, Clemson had a really good defense last year. 8 of those starters are back. They have what probably is the best linebacker duo in the ACC, top 5 linebacker duo in the country with Carter and Trotter. I believe it's Carter and Trotter. Anyway, they're both back, 2 of the best linebackers in the country. Defensive tackle Tyler Davis is a 3-time All-ACC player. He could have went pro last year. He decided to come back. He's got a chance to be one of the only 4-time All-ACC defensive tackles in history this year at Clemson. That's Tyler Davis. He's back with the Taters again this year. And Xavier Thomas, this is a guy that's been around forever, NFL potential from the time he was in 10th grade, but he's just had a really hard time staying healthy at the defensive end position. If he can go an entire season without missing any games, he could put up just absolutely ridiculous numbers. He's got to stay healthy. That would be a key to Clemson's defense this year. But he's a 6-year guy. Not because he doesn't have the talent to be in the NFL a long time ago. 6-year guy because injuries have just derailed his career. But this is sort of his last hurrah to get it back on track. As a college football fan, I'm pulling for the kid. I hope he has a good year. I hope he stays healthy. He'll be fun to watch this year on that Clemson defense. The secondary has got to play a million times better than what it did last year. Nate Wiggins is back at corner, and I think he's got a lot of potential. But again, it didn't show up last year on the field, at least not when they needed it to. Tennessee lit them up. South Carolina lit them up. Wake Forest lit. Too many teams just abused this secondary last year. Nate Wiggins is going to have to play. Nate Wiggins is going to have to play a whole lot better, as is the rest of that secondary. All right, here we go. Let's put Clemson's schedule up on the screen. We're going to go through it game by game, and we're going to figure out what can the Taters do in 2023. Will it be another C- year for my buddies out in Clemson? We're about to find out. They start things off Memorial Day weekend. The ACC's got to answer some questions here. Memorial Day weekend on the road at Duke. I think it was last year they did the same thing. Was it last year or the year before? I think it might have been last year. They made Clemson play Georgia Tech in Atlanta on the road to open up the season. Now, I'm not saying that, the ACC is trying to set up Clemson to fail or that Georgia Tech and Duke are 2 top 5 teams or programs or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there in the ACC. But Monday night game here, Monday, September 4th, the Labor Day game, Clemson on the road, true road game at Duke, Wallace Wade Stadium, 8 o'clock Labor Day night. Duke won 9 games last year. They didn't play Clemson, so we don't know what would have happened last year had they played each other, but Duke won 9 games. They were 8-4 in the regular season. They won their bowl game. I think it was the Military Bowl against Central Florida, a decent group of 5 team. But how about their 4 losses? Well, one of their losses was by 8 points. All right, 8. Okay. 2 of their losses were by 3 points. And their 4th loss was by 2 points. 3 of their 4 losses were 3 points or less. One of them was overtime. And then there was an 8-point loss. Duke was a good team last year with a really good offense and a really good quarterback. In terms of returning production at quarterback, this Riley Leonard at Duke is miles beyond anything Cade Klubnik did last year. Now, I don't think he's better than Cade Klubnik. That's not what I'm saying. But Duke, this is a scary game for Clemson. If you're a Clemson fan and you're just looking at this schedule and going, oh, well, week 1 Duke, we're going to win that one, you might want to get your head out of the sand and start paying attention. If Clemson's football team feels the same way that fan does, Clemson's going to get their ass embarrassed in week 1 on the road at Duke. Duke can win this game. If Clemson has not figured out their issues offensively and in the back end of that secondary, they will lose this game. They will lose this game if they don't have those things figured out. And here's the problem if you're Clemson. Duke's returning 17 starters. They returned their quarterback. They've got all their key pieces back. They're not having to learn something new here at the beginning of the season. Clemson's on its third offensive coordinator in the last 3 years. They've got a brand new starter at quarterback. They've got a bunch of wide receivers that, like I mentioned before, nobody watching this video outside of a couple of Clemson fans can name any of them. They lost 4 of their best players off the defense to the NFL draft. And they've got a secondary that's absolutely horrendous, at least it was last year. If Clemson ain't ready to go, they're going to lose this game. There is no warm-up time here. There's Clemson's losing week. Duke is beating Clemson. Clemson is starting 0-1. Clemson is. I'm picking Duke to win this game. I'm not laughing because people are going to think I'm trolling now. I'm not trolling. I'm legitimately picking Duke to win this game. I'm concerned about a few things as it relates to Clemson as a program. Dabo Swinney, his attitude towards NIL and the transfer portal and recruiting in general. Setting all that aside, though, Duke is just a legitimate team. 9-4 last year, 17 starters coming back. One of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. Coaching staff returns. Home game, week 1 at night. The Clemson fans and I can't imagine Clemson being up for this game. I don't see it. I don't want to use the word struggled with Georgia Tech last year, but go back and watch Clemson versus Georgia Tech last year. And keep in mind, Georgia Tech was a horrible team, 3 or 4 win team. It's absolutely horrible. Clemson struggled with them for the majority of that game. Just go back and watch it. Don't look at the score. Go back and watch the game. I'm picking Duke. Monumental upset here in week 1 of college football. I'm picking Duke to beat Clemson at home in week 1. Give me the Dukies. Clemson starts 0-1, and all the Clemson fans have now clicked off the video. Week 2, back home, Charleston Southern, you will get a win. No problem. Florida Atlantic, same thing. Clemson wins big. They're starting to roll now. Clemson needs 2 or 3 weeks. You know what you need? You need Charleston Southern and Florida Atlantic before the Duke game. ACC Conference. What are you doing? You're setting Clemson up to fail here. So a loss to Duke, followed up by back-to-back wins against Charleston Southern and Florida Atlantic. And then the Florida State game, probably the game of the year in the ACC. And guess what? Florida State will already have a loss by this point, too. I've got LSU beating Florida State in week 1, and I've got Duke beating Clemson in week 1. This will be a battle of one-loss teams here, and I think Florida State wins at Memorial Stadium in Death Valley. Clemson is 2-2 after the first month of the season. On the road at Syracuse, a win for Clemson, not buying into Syracuse. Come back home, play Wake Forest. Sam Hartman's gone. Now, they still have a dangerous offense. The coaches are still there. Their offense is very unique. It's almost like practicing for the triple option. I don't mean that it is the triple option. I mean that it's such a unique offense that nothing you do preparing for Syracuse or Florida State or Duke, nothing you do preparing for those teams helps you to prepare for Wake Forest. It's a totally separate, just unique offense that they run, but I think Clemson gets the win. Wake Forest without Sam Hartman, to me, not nearly as dangerous. I'll take Clemson to win that one at home, and then you head into your bye week. Come out of your bye week, go on the road, and you play Miami. Boy, don't tell the Miami man this, but they're going to be bad again this year. I think Clemson gets the win on the road at Miami. Back-to-back road games can be tricky. In fact, this is a 3-game stretch here that Clemson really needs to be careful. They are better than all 3 of these teams, I think, including Notre Dame. Clemson, I think, is going to get better as the season goes along. People are shaking their heads still about the Duke pick. I think Clemson will be better 7 or 8 weeks into the season than they are in week 1, particularly offensively. I just think it's going to take a while for that offense to kind of figure itself out. Again, 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years and a brand-new quarterback. I think you go on the road and beat Miami. I think you go on the road and beat NC State. And I think you beat Notre Dame at home. I've already done a Notre Dame version of this video, so you might have already known that. But I've already done the Notre Dame prediction and preview video, and I think Notre Dame loses on the road in Clemson. That's a big win there for Clemson. You win 3 I don't want to say those are 3 tough games. Miami's not very good, but back-to-back road games and then a home game against Notre Dame. That's definitely not the easiest 3-game stretch in the world, but I think Clemson finds a way to get through it and win all 3 at Miami, at NC State, home against Notre Dame. Home against Georgia Tech, you'll win that, no problem. Brent Key is a massive upgrade over Jeff Collins and the previous coaching staff, but Georgia Tech, from a talent perspective, is still just miles away, really, from competing with anybody in the Power 5, never mind Clemson. I think Clemson gets the job done there. North Carolina, I just don't trust their defense. Again, by this point in the season, I think Clemson offensively will be much better than they were in the first couple of games of the season. I do like Drake May. He may be a better quarterback than Clay Klubnik. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't know. We'll see. I really, really like Drake May, though. I don't think they should have kept their defensive coordinator, but they did. Gene Chizik, I think they should have let him go and went a different direction. They didn't do it. They lost some players to the transfer portal. They lost 2 of their top wide receivers. Drake May's dangerous. North Carolina could definitely win this game. Being at home for Clemson obviously helps. I think Clemson beats North Carolina. And in the last game of the season, on the road at South Carolina, in-state rivalry, of course, they beat you last year, snapping a long winning streak in that series for Clemson and snapping Clemson's home winning streak that had gone all the way back to 2016. South Carolina beats them again. South Carolina gets the Taters 2 years in a row, this time winning at home. I think this will be the biggest win of Beamer's career. Last year's win was really big, but it being on the road, I don't think it meant quite as much as this year if they can get the job done in front of their home fans. South Carolina's a team that's heading in the right direction. Again, not a team I expect to be some sort of top 5 program in the next 2 years, but if you look at the recruiting there and what Beamer's doing, the talent level is increasing. I think Spencer Rattler will have a better year this year than he had last year, and I think South Carolina beats Clemson for the 2nd year in a row. That's a loss to Duke, a loss to Florida State, and a loss to South Carolina. And the Tater Man is at 9-3 for 2023. Not going to be happy. That's the bad news. Good news? There is good news. There is good news. I think you still make the ACC title game. I think you still make the ACC title game. I think the ACC title game is going to be Clemson versus Florida State in a rematch. 9-3, losses to Duke, and what was the other loss? Florida State. So that's 2 ACC losses. The third loss, South Carolina, is a non-con loss. So you're going to have 2 conference losses. I think that's good enough to get Clemson into the ACC title game, most likely with a rematch against Florida State. So there you go. That's my 2023 Clemson Tater preview and game-by-game prediction. And remember, don't shoot the messenger.